Introducing our committee staff, especially, I don't know that I don't believe we had any changes in committee members, so that will be the same. But I do have a new committee assistant, so I'd like to introduce Tyler Kirby. Tyler. So welcome, Tyler. Glad to have you. And I want to thank Connie Burns for all of her great work and assistance last year. And she's also riding alongside Tyler to start out with, so appreciate Connie and all of her hard work, so thank you. Unless the committee has any questions about the committee rules, they did not change from last session, so unless there's any question or concern about the committee rules? Seeing none? Are there any bill introductions this morning? Seeing none. We will move on to our first order of business, which is a SNAP update on the Kansas error rate and waiver status from Dr. Carla Whiteside Hicks, Director of Economic and Employment Services from the Kansas Department of Children and Families. Welcome, Doctor.
Good morning, Chair Erickson and members of the committee. I am Dr. Carla Whiteside Hicks, Director of Economic and Employment Services for DCF, and I welcome the opportunity to give you an update on these two items that are absolutely a priority for my team right now. So I know that you all are familiar with the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We call it Food Assistance in the state of Kansas. And you also likely know that the 2025 Budget Reconciliation Bill, or H.R. 1, did include several updates to the SNAP program, and so we are responding to those. One of those changes is a change in the state match. So, for example, for the administrative portion, historically there has been a 50-50 cost share between the federal government and the states. That will be changing to 75-25, meaning states will now be responsible for 75% of the match, and the federal government will be responsible for 25. Another change that is significant is a change in the response to each state's payment error rate. So the rules for the payment error rate in terms of it needing to be below 6% have been in law for a very long time. What has changed with this bill is that there are now consequences. There are financial consequences for not having an error rate that is below the 6% mark. So we are doing several things to address that, and I do want to be clear that we did not just start addressing this. We have been addressing this. We knew what the federal threshold was, and when this legislation was passed, it just caused us to double down on some of the things that we were already doing, and then to also kind of take a step back to review what we were doing to make sure that we were on track to actually identify what the root cause of our errors are so that we could make sure that we were moving forward in the right direction. And one of the things that we did with that was to contract with a Human Services Group, a consulting firm, and they came in, reviewed our data, reviewed our processes, and they have made suggestions for how we can improve our payment error rate. I am actually happy to say that most of their suggestions are things that were already on our radar. There were things that we were already doing or that we were planning to do. So backing up to what the HR 1, some of those new processes or how our processes will be impacted by that. So in the initial year, so starting in federal fiscal year 2028, that is when the matching rate is going to change. That is when our payment error rate for federal fiscal year 2026 is what we are going to use, and that's what will determine what our match rate is for, or what our additional cost will be for those benefits that are going to be paid starting in federal fiscal year 20-something, federal fiscal year 28 is when those changes will take effect. And so what that means is that if we have our payment error rate for the full year of federal fiscal year 2026 below 6%, then there is no additional cost to the state. The additional cost that is tied to the payment error rate is for the actual benefits that are paid to families. Historically, those benefits have been 100% federal funds. If our payment error rate is not below 6%, the state will be required to add state funds to continue to be able to support Kansas families in the way that we have in the past. There is a chart on page 4 of the document that you have, a couple of charts actually, that just give you a graphic of the progress of our payment error rate. We do know that so far we are still coming down. Our average as of August for this federal fiscal year, and there is a lag. There is a lag in determining what the payment error rate is for a month. There is a long process. We pull or actually there's our system pulls a sample of cases. Those samples have to be approved by F&S. They verify the methodology that we use to be able to pull those sample cases. It's about 1,800 cases a month. Then our quality control team reviews each of those cases. They are going through, they are looking at the documentation, they are looking at the interview notes, they're reaching out to the families to verify information, to verify that we did everything that we were supposed to do, that we are able to justify every decision that we made concerning that case. We then make a determination in terms of an overpayment, an underpayment, or hopefully we got everything right. Food and Nutrition Services then re-reviews our review to make sure that we really did review those cases correctly, that we caught everything that we should have caught. That then becomes our payment error rate for that month. For the month of August, which is the most recent month that we have confirmation from the federal government of that rate, our most recent rate is 5.5% for the month of August. We are absolutely moving in the right direction, but we know that we have a long way to go to make sure that we not only get our payment error rate below 6%, but that we keep it there. One of the things that I also wanted to note is that the payment error rate is not just agency error. It is also client error. And the client errors could be things like, my rent changed since I applied for food assistance. I didn't tell DCF that my rent changed. Well, if my rent is reduced, then that is going to impact my benefit amount. So that's not something that the agency did not follow up on, we did not know. So as we're working through with Human Services Group, it's not just a matter of additional training for staff, better documentation for staff. A component of that is also helping those that we serve understand what information must be reported to DCF between their scheduled interactions with us. So between the 6-month review or the 12-month review or the recertification periods. So that is also a part of the process that we are going through. Again, we have seen improvement. One of the things that is going to help us in our plans moving forward is that we were recently awarded a grant from Kansas Health Foundation for $275,000 to use for technology to assist in improving our payment error rate. One of the things that we are looking at, and you will see a chart at the bottom of page 5 or some of the technology solutions that we have been exploring. So we're looking at things like better training, so some online training so that our eligibility workers can have targeted training that is specific to an area in which they seem to be underperforming. So if I struggle with interviewing, I hear what the client's saying, but the client tells me $500 a month in rent, I put $475 in keys, why is that happening? And do I not understand that it is important to say what the client said and so that we are consistent across the board? So there will be some scenarios that we can help eligibility workers with to help them understand specifically what they should be journaling, because a lot of our errors are related to documentation and making sure that we are consistent in that. It is okay that the applicant reported $475 in rent on the application, but I have $500 in keys. I just have to tell you why. I have to put in writing why I put $500 in keys, and it's the rent was increased between the application being submitted and the interview. So it's those things that we are hoping to address with our staff. And then we're also looking at some technology that once the eligibility worker has input all of the pertinent information into keys, so we've entered, we know everyone who's supposed to be in the household, we've added income, we've added expenses, we've done all of those things. So we know that there are certain cases, there are certain criteria that make a case at a higher risk for error. It could be unearned income. That is a huge one. So what we are going to do, we are identifying what those high-risk scenarios are, and we're going to flag those cases in our system so that as an eligibility worker, I've entered everything I can. Keys, our eligibility system, when I go to hit that last button to authorize benefits, Keys will say, stop. let's go back and review and make sure that you really did get this right, because this is one of those cases that is at a high risk for error. So that's another bit of technology that we are hoping to be able to implement. Again, just another layer of protection to get our eligibility workers to take a step back and to make sure that they have actually reviewed everything and maybe have some follow-up conversations with families if that is necessary. Then there is the food restriction waiver. You all know this. In 2025, Kansas State Senate Bill 125 required the DCF. Yes.
Dr. Whiteside, if you could just pause there before we go on to that portion to see if there are any questions the committee has on your first part. So committee, what questions do we have? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. I may have missed it, that you said that the August rate was 5.9. Is that what you said?
5.5.
5.5. Okay. And so, how do they calculate that for the year? Is it all average of all the year?
Yes, it is.
And do we know what 2025 was for the year?
2025, I believe, was 9.13.
9.13. Okay. Thank you for that. I must have missed it. Thank you.
Committee, other questions? I just have a couple of quick ones. So you mentioned that you hired a third-party consulting firm. Were there any suggestions or recommendations that they made that were not implemented by the department?
There were not. There were some that they mentioned that we were aware of but had not prioritized. And so now we are currently, so they have finished all of their discovery work. And what we're doing now is we've taken their formal recommendations, we've put them into a decision matrix, and we are evaluating each recommendation to determine not only if we can do it, how quickly can we do it. So if it's something that will take 2 years to implement, that's too late for what we're doing right now. It doesn't mean we're not going to do it, but it means that that cannot be our focus right now. So we are taking those, but no, there's nothing they have recommended that we hadn't already thought of.
Thank you very much. And is it possible for this committee to get a list of those recommendations and where the department is in implementing those?
I believe so.
Okay, that would be great. My second question is, can you kind of tell me where with our 2025 error rate, the penalties associated and what the state may be looking at in terms of our error rate penalties?
Yes, that is actually on page 3. So that's that chart. So where we are right now with our cumulative payment error rate, it would cost the state an additional $41.3 million annually to support clients in the manner that they've been. So if we're going to continue to give them the same dollar amount that they are receiving based on that 130% of federal poverty level, it would cost the state an additional $41.3 million. If we continue in our trend, we don't quite get to where to under 6%, it would still cost the state an additional $20.7 million. And that's an estimate based on our estimated caseload.
And is that determined annually? And if so, what is the time period? So it's not based on like the monthly, but when is that assessed? Is it an annual assessment?
So HR 1 gives states the ability to choose as that for the base year, either federal fiscal year 25 or federal fiscal year 26. We do not want to use 25 because we were above 6%. So our goal right now, our focus is on getting our payment error rate below 6% by the end of federal fiscal year 26. So that becomes our base, and then we do not have the additional costs that would be assessed to the state.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Committee, any other questions on this? Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here. I believe I saw it in here and was trying to find it again. The national error rate or the overall SNAP error rate is quite a bit higher than what we are at now, correct?
Yes, it is. I believe it is in here, and I believe it's more than 10%.
Okay, yeah, I just found it. The national average is 10.23%. And then I was looking online, it looks like there's some states that have substantially higher ones, like even 22%. So, and we are now at, that figure was, what did you say, 5%, 5.5?
That was just for the month of August.
Month of August, okay, very good. All right, well, thank you. It looks like it's going in the right direction, so appreciate that. All right, thanks.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you walk us through a little bit what cooperation with our federal partners might look like on this program and what tools that might be available to try to help make the work of you and your staff better when it comes to SNAP compliance?
So, yes, thank you for that. One thing I will say is that in working with Human Services Group, there were several individuals assigned to our state who are former employees of Food and Nutrition Services. They know the rules. They know the federal rules. So with that partnership, we were able to have a better connection with our regional staff, with the Mountain Plains region. We already had that connection. So our assistant director, who is responsible for program integrity, is in constant communication with FNS to find out, are we interpreting this correctly? That was one of the things that Human Services Group did. They went through our policies, through our policy manual, 700 pages of it, to make sure that what we are doing is actually aligned with the federal government. Are we doing too much? Are we not doing enough? Are we doing things the way that we should be doing? But that has been a good partnership. We do have, I can't speak for other regions, but in the Mountain Plains region, we do get really good feedback from those staff members.
Seeing no other questions, please proceed to the waiver.
Okay, so the SNAP food restriction waiver. So as I was saying, in 2025, Kansas State Senate Bill 125 required the DCF secretary to request a waiver from FNS that would restrict the purchase of pop and candy with using the EBT card for those households who are receiving SNAP. So we did submit our initial waiver to FNS on May 14th of last year, and we have been meeting with our regional FNS staff monthly since then to move to final waiver approval. We're not quite there yet. So there was additional information that has been requested of us. I can tell you that just yesterday afternoon, I submitted another document to that team, hoping that we can move this process along. As we have been doing that, as we have continued to meet with FNS and provide the information that they are asking for, I believe I said this to you all last year. I recognized early on that we do not have internal capacity to move through this process. We do not. So we have approval, and we issued an RFP that was just recently posted. It was posted on December 29th. It will close on February 17th. And what we're looking for is basically a project manager, someone to come in and help us with these plans, with the communication plan, with the retailer plan, all of those things that are required, so that after our waiver is approved, we will have that team, that project manager in place to be able to move us to implementation within the 18 months that we have allowed ourselves. So we're not waiting for the contractor to be identified. We're still working. We're still meeting with FNS. And like I said, just yesterday, I submitted another update to that team, and I'm still waiting for their feedback on that.
Are you ready for questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, committee, what questions do we have? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess kind of two questions here. So you just referenced the need to send out an RFP, bring in kind of an external consultant project manager. Is that fairly standard for waivers? Or, I mean, it seems to me that there's a number of waivers that are processed in any given year. I guess speak to why that extra staffing need and spending need would be there. And then as a follow-up to that, why is Kansas unique in our timeline? Our neighboring states, Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, as well as Arkansas, Iowa, and a number of other states have all had their waivers submitted, processed, approved, and being enacted. So why is Kansas so unique in this regard?
So thank you for that. So the first thing, this waiver request is different. Typically, waiver requests that we submit are 2, 3, 4 pages. I can tell you that even as we've been going along all these months, the updates that I provided just yesterday, I believe it was like a 17-page document. So there's more detail that is required. Typically, in a waiver request, we can say we will implement in 18 months after approval. That's not what this waiver request is. I have to tell, what's my specific timeline? How am I going to implement? How am I reaching out to retailers? How am I going to hold them accountable? How am I communicating with Kansans so that they know what the rules are? So all of those details have to be added to this waiver, and that is not what has happened in the past. And then why so long? That's part of it. Our team, they are not accustomed to that. Absolutely not accustomed to that, and they do not have the capacity to go through that detailed of a process that is pretty linear, and it's an analytic process, and they are not accustomed to having do that, and they do not have the skill set to do that. That's one. The other is the complexity of what we are restricting. So some states are restricting energy drinks. Well, that's easy. It says energy drink on the bottle, and so that's restricted. With our definitions, particularly of candy, it makes it more difficult. So the process of working with retailers in particular and helping them understand what must be eliminated for Kansans it's a lengthy process. So being able to reach out to retailers is not just saying no one can buy energy drinks anymore. It's helping them with that process of knowing what is and is not going to be allowed.
Committee, other questions? I do have a couple just following up on Senator Shane's question. How have other states, especially our neighboring states, I'm looking at the map, Oklahoma, they received approval on June 10th of 2025 by the USDA, and it's in effect February 15th. Nebraska, the waiver was submitted April 15th, 2025, was approved on May 19th and went into effect January 1st. So all of these states are able to work through this process in less than a year. And I've looked at all of their definitions of candy, very similar to ours. I mean, one says anything that adds sugar or honey or an artificial sweetener, that's candy. I mean, so very broad, yet they've been able to get it implemented in less than a year. So my question is, why is it so difficult for us when 18 states have been able to implement this, apply for the waiver, get approval, and implement in less than a year?
Thank you for that. I don't know that I would say that it's a difficult process. I will go back to, we don't have staff who can walk through that linear process, that analytic process of here's what's needed, here are the 5 steps that we need to get from here to here, and to put that in a format that is acceptable to the federal government. That has been our issue. What the most recent meeting that we had with Food and Nutrition Services, I believe it was last Monday or Tuesday, their suggestion was that we look at approved waivers from other states in the region similar to us, and that's what I did. So the most recent edits that I've given them, the additional information that I've given them, I was looking at a plan that had been approved and saying, oh, okay, we missed this step in that. Let me add that step. So I have taken that on myself to make sure that we are addressing everything that we are supposed to address. So I fully anticipate some positive news from FNS in the coming days.
So we submitted our waiver in May of 2025. Correct. Did you reach out to any states, our neighboring states? I mean, again, I'm looking at the map. We are an island of states in this area that have not done this, that have applied for a waiver. Did you reach out to any of your counterparts and say, how did you do this? How did you navigate this in order to get yours done in less than a year?
Yes, we did have staff who reached out to those states. At the time, the specific information, the details that I now have access to, we didn't have those. So there was, for example, a state could have submitted a waiver request, much like ours, that was fairly short, But then working with FNS, which is what we have been doing the past several months, there were details that were added that are not part of the initial waiver request, so they're not online. So we can't just go out there and see them. Now we are being more aggressive with that, and what really didn't have to be aggressive. The state that I was looking at in particular, their full waiver request has all of the, what I deem to be all of the details that are needed, and it was available online. And so that's what I used basically as a template to make sure that we have addressed everything.
So you say in your testimony that you're confident that the waiver will be granted shortly. What do you mean by shortly? Can you give us a more definitive timeline as to when you think it will be granted? And once it is granted, how long before it goes into effect?
I cannot give you a definitive answer in terms of when it might be approved. I submitted the most recent updates to FNS yesterday afternoon. As of an hour ago, I had not received an acknowledgement of that email. Typically, I will get an acknowledgement that they have received, excuse me, received the document, and then they will do their internal review process. I would hope that I would get a response from them, either, yes, this is everything we need, or there's still some missing details by the end of the week, or at least an acknowledgement that says, we're taking this under review. So that, I have no control over that. What we did in our plan, in our waiver request, we asked for 18 months to implement. We may not need 18 months to implement, and we've been clear with that with Food Nutrition Services, but allowing that time, especially for the work with the retailers, to make sure that we have those communication plans in place. With continuing to work with FNS, even while we have an active RFP, what that allows us to do is, if we can get our waiver request approved next week, even early next month, when we have a contractor in place, that contractor now has a solid foundation. They're no longer helping us get waiver approval. We've already moved past that step, is my expectation, and now they can immediately start working on developing out the plans that are required and moving toward implementation, so that hopefully it would not take us 18 months.
So do you have any idea, or can you share with us what other states did as far as communication with the retailers, getting that plan in place, what that process looked like?
It appears that other states have tapped into, National Retail Grocers Association, things like that. They've pulled in those organizations within their states that are responsible, that represent grocers. And they have them at the table, not at the end where we're saying, here's our plan, get on board with it, but bring them to the table at the beginning so that those organizations can help us identify the best ways to communicate. So I may think that it's best to put up billboards, and they're saying, no, we have a listserv. That's the best way to get the information out. So making sure that we are actively engaging them in the process as we're moving to implementation is going to be critical, and that's what other states have done.
Have you engaged those stakeholders in the process as of yet?
We have not. That is something that we are expecting the contractor to do. However, if we get waiver approval before the contract is in place, there are some steps that we can begin to take. So we're not going to pause and just wait for the contractor to be in place. Even if we're approved today, we're not just going to pause and wait for that contractor. We will still continue to work.
And how much is the RFP and the amount budgeted for the contractor?
I do not have that dollar amount with me, but I can get it for you.
Okay. If you can get that to the committee assistant, we'll get that distributed to the committee. And is there a way that this committee can get a copy of the waiver that was submitted?
The waiver, the initial waiver request?
Or any updates to the waiver requests that have been made?
We have a working spreadsheet that we go back and forth with FNS, and they identify areas where we still need to provide additional information, and so we do have that document.
I would like a copy of the original, and then any updates or any additional submissions that have been made. Okay, any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much,
Right, thank
Doctor,
you.
for being here and for the update. We'll look forward to that additional information.
All right, thank you.
Committee, a couple of housekeeping. We will not be meeting tomorrow because there is a joint House Appropriations and Senate Ways and Means Committee meeting during this time, and we have several members who are on Senate Ways and Means, so we will not meet tomorrow, but we will meet Thursday, and we'll have an update from the Inspector General on the work he's been doing in the interim. So, anything else from the committee? Seeing no other business, we are adjourned.